Are you ready to embark on a journey of success? To discover your true potential in the untold stories of careers in life sciences? Welcome to PATHFINDER by the Purdue Institute of Inflammation, Immunology and Infectious Disease. With your host, Tommy Soares, discover the untold stories of industry scientists and unveil the secrets to excelling in your career. Thank you for joining us once again, and remember to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Welcome, everybody. My name is Tommy Soares. I am the Director of Scientific Strategy and Relations for the Purdue Institute of Inflammation, Immunology and Infectious Disease. And today on PATHFINDER, I have the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Karen Corbin, who is a clinical translational scientist at AdventHealth Translational Research Institute, and she's focused on advancing gut microbiome and human metabolism research. She's also the founder and chief geek at Geeks That Speak, with a mission to elevate the voices of scientists through scientific storytelling. I also picked up Karen's LinkedIn description where she says she's a human nutrition and metabolism expert that is passionate about scientific storytelling. My career aspirations are twofold: to advance clinically relevant research that is poised to transform patient care, and to lead scientific communications initiatives. Why is scientific storytelling a critical skill for medical professionals and scientists? Well, mastering the art of scientific communications allows clinicians and researchers to translate complex scientific information to broad communities of impact. This skill helps move ideas into action and build the appropriate funding and collaborations necessary for research that pushes medical innovation forward. I am so excited to talk to you today, Karen. This is awesome. And it's so great. I think I almost have like a communications theme going on here for the last few episodes. And it's so good to have you on the program. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm super excited to share what I know.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, why don't you give us a little bit of a perspective of like, how did you get into science maybe? And what was it about communicating the complexities of science to maybe a broader audience? Because that, I think, that's something I gravitated to very early on as well. I thought, oh my gosh, I have like a knack here. I have something that I can give to the world that might be inspiring to others. So at least that's where I got into it. And I don't know what is your story? What got you into it?
So I got into science first, and even as a young girl, before I had met a scientist or knew really what science was, I literally had dreams of having a white lab coat on and making discoveries. I attributed maybe to Wonder Woman because I used to watch that show, and she was in math and science and had a lab coat sometimes. So it's always been a passion of mine, and solving problems is really where I get excited because I don't like it when things don't work. So that sort of started me down the science track. Communication for me came very much later. I was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and when I was a young kid and I came to the States, I had an accent, and kids made fun of me. That's how things were back in the day. And so I just learned that silence was safe for me. So I decided I'll just be backstage. I'll stay quiet. I'll do my work. I'll still succeed, but I don't want to talk in front of anybody. So little did I know when I chose to go into first healthcare as a registered dietitian and then science, that communication is so important for our work. So we can't get away without it. So I thought to myself, well, I'm either going to sink or swim, right? I either need to embrace this piece of my career, or I'm maybe not going to be so successful. So I started practicing, learning, looking for opportunities to get better, just sort of organically over many, many years. And interestingly, my first job as a registered dietitian, where I thought literally I would just be talking one-on-one, so there wouldn't be this stage presence. Well, they didn't tell me when they hired me, they had this traveling show where they trained clinics all over the country on how to establish these prevention lipid management clinics. And that was going to become part of my job. So just over time, on the job learning, practicing. Then I got to graduate school in a medical school at the University of South Florida in Tampa. And, we interacted with physicians and scientists. And sometimes I'd be in a room and the physician and the scientist were saying the same thing, but they weren't quite understanding each other. So maybe because I speak a different language, I naturally translate. So it's kind of funny that I became a translational scientist and I literally like to translate the knowledge in a way people can understand. So that led me to say there's a gap here. And then I'd also see my fellow students kind of struggling with communicating and, journal clubs and seminars. And so they would ask me for help sometimes because they would notice that, I did a pretty good job and really mostly was because of practice. And so that eventually over time, I started actually enjoying doing it. And it became my substitute for my second career option, which was dance. I was either going to be a dancer or a scientist. So it became my replacement for performing in a way. And all through my career, I've noticed the importance of communication. And when I got down here to AdventHealth in Orlando, and the work we do could have so much relevance to patient care, it became really important to me to figure out how to take what I knew and share it with other people. So I was trying to figure out how to do that and what to call it. And I was in the parking lot one day talking to Stephen Smith, who I've been working with down here for a lot of years. And I was explaining something to him and he said, "You're the geek that speaks." And I said, "Yes, that is the name." I trademarked it. And that just sort of started the journey of me taking what I know, refining it, and helping to deliver it to other people who could use the help.
That is awesome. And
Thank you.
you have no idea how much connection we share. I don't know if you knew, but I'm from Caracas, Venezuela originally.
Wow.
So Spanish is my first language too. And I agree with you. I think there's something about us having to translate Spanish to English and vice versa. And like how maybe our brains learned English and English language on its own that we are like, oh, very cognizant of how communication needs to be in that point of translation. So fascinating to hear your background and the similarities in our backgrounds too. It's awesome. So, and I always wondered, how did Wonder Woman ever find her invisible plane? But that's a different story here.
We'll have to ask her. Linda Carter can come on the show and tell
That's
us.
right. I'd love to
The
have her on the
OG, the
show.
OG.
That's right. But yeah, so it's incredible that initial inspiration of the lab coat and the romantic view of research and so tell us a little bit as you went through your PhD and you started really getting into the science and seeing that there was this gap in communication that you could bridge. Was that always did that always drive you to seek out better resources or courses to make you a better communicator? Or did that just mean that you were more careful in how you picked the words that you were going to pick to communicate?
So it's both. So, no amount of coaching or resources can replace hard work and practice. So even when I coach people, I can only hand them the tools, but they have to want to do the work. And it's certainly a lot more work to deliver a talk in a way that's engaging, maybe a little entertaining, maybe a little inspiring, and importantly, that inspires an action. So I did spend quite a lot of time and energy with various coaches and various books, and one of the things that I recommend to the people that work with me is become a consumer of talks. Watch the TED Talks. Watch, if there's local events in your community for public speaking, like we have something called Nerd Night here, go to those, listen, see what do you like about what they did? What don't you like? How could you learn from those experiences? So it's really a journey, and I'm always looking to get better, and you get better by practicing and taking as many opportunities as possible to talk to people.
I like that a lot. And I think that's such a great recommendation, right? Every opportunity you can to stand up in front of a group of people and talk, you should take it, because it's scary and it's challenging. But once you're over that challenge, you understand, oh gosh, this was good. And then many times, like it's happened so many times, where you end a presentation or something and you're like, oh gosh, I forgot to say that, or I could have said that better. I mean, how do we get rid of some of those? Or is it just, as you said, practice?
Yeah, so I mean, I still get nervous. I think it's impossible not to have some nerves. You're getting up on a stage in front of strangers, and any number of things could happen. Um, but I think that there's always a talk that I give where I forget something or I could have said it better, but that's what makes us human. And what I tell the people that I work with is that's actually a feature, and it's an advantage because the audience would rather you be up there than them. So if you stumble a little or you forget something, not a big deal. You're a person, you're a human, you're not a Hollywood actress that has memorized a script. So those things to me are okay, and just makes the audience sort of feel connected to you because those things happen to them too.
Yeah. And the humanness of it all, right? Being able to be relatable to your audience because they see that you're just like them.
Yes.
But you have more courage to stand up and get up and do it. So okay, so you found out about this ability that you have, and so you formed this you formed this Geeks That Speak. Is it a podcast? Is it a resource? Is it a service? How are you doing this, Karen?
So it's a service. Scientists sometimes aren't the best business people. We're not often trained in that. So I created a formal, limited liability corporation, and I created my content, and then I deliver it whenever the opportunity arises. So I don't do a lot of advertising, or I don't have a marketing budget because it's just me right now. So whenever an opportunity comes up or somebody asks, could you do this for a university or a biotech company or a pharma company, then that's, when I deliver. Usually it's a group type of scenario, but I do workshops and I do one-on-one coaching. I do it a lot here at my day job at AdventHealth because we have a lot of trainees and postdocs. And for those who have, they got a big talk at American Diabetes and they really want to do a good job, then we sit down and go through a few coaching sessions. And I think that that's super helpful, just having somebody in your corner that will tell you what you're doing well and will tell you what you can improve on, and you can ask questions. So that's kind of my little Geeks That Speak world.
That's great. That's fantastic. And what an asset to have inside the company, somebody that can help people be better communicators. You emphasize storytelling, scientific storytelling. What are some of the things that really the scientists that are listening or watching this interview, what are the first few things that they should really be thinking about when we talk about storytelling? And I'll tell you from my perspective, I teach how to write grants, and we write grants together all the time. And very much a very important factor is this scientific storytelling. So what are some of the key pillars that we should have in there?
So it's funny that you say that because sometimes I get pushback on the idea of storytelling. Like, wait a minute, science is about facts and numbers and data and p-values, and all that's true. But storytelling is just a way to have a flow that makes sense. So a beginning, a middle, and end, not much different than a movie in Hollywood where, you don't want the conclusion first and then you get the introduction and then you get the methods at the end, right? There's a natural flow already built into what we do, and when we communicate science orally or on paper. So it's not really a foreign concept, but to me, it's more about leading people through your data rather than dumping your data out and just having graph after graph after graph. And we did this, and then we did this, and then we did this. And it just, even for a key opinion leader in your field, that becomes hard to follow.
Yeah.
So it's about connecting the pieces, connecting with your audience and thinking, how do I make this as meaningful and relatable to the people that have chosen to give me 30 minutes of their time or an hour of their time? That makes such a huge difference because you bring them in, and you want to do that very early with either, an anecdote or a personal story, or just acknowledging something about that group and how your talk relates to the group. So if you're talking to nurses, bring in the importance of nurses to the research process and how valued they are in that process, for example. And then, the data dump piece gets fixed by connecting everything. It's kind of like when you write, how they teach you have to connect the paragraphs so that they
Yes.
flow. It's very similar to that. And at the end, there should be a big picture that becomes clear from the beginning and is carried through the entire talk. I call that the through line.
Mm.
So there's a lot of things you could cover. And I know you're very excited about your data and you want to tell everybody everything, but you don't have time. And not everybody wants to know everything. You want to pick out the most important points that go along that through line. Think of it like a clothesline and just hanging your points right on that through line so that at the end there's a one big message that's supported by, just a few key elements of that. And then, you have all your extra slides in the back. So for the Q&A, if somebody wants more details about stuff, you can go into that. So those are some of the sort of foundational principles of storytelling, in my opinion.
And so this is as much true for writing communication as well as presentations.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you want your reader or your listener to get excited about what you have to say. If a grant reviewer is not excited about your proposal very early, you're very unlikely to get much past, the aims page with them.
Yeah.
And you have to highlight, like, how is this moving the needle? What is the innovation? What is important about this work that I want the funding for, or that I'm going to talk to you about? So yes, it is very, very similar.
And so and it's awesome because I think, we are, most of us are lazy people, right? I'm totally lazy. And they say, oh, you should really outline before you start writing, or right. But I think if you don't do that, if you don't outline, if you don't follow some of the guidance, especially like as you're saying, you've got to be able to have a thread throughout the talk and be able to guide your listeners in, even if it's guide your readers right into what you're creating. It's so important to maintain that fluidity and that constancy for the reader's psychology, if anything, right? Or the listener's psychology.
Yeah, and it's really so that you're leading them through and they can be with you and they can follow the storyline versus losing them, confusing them, which can become very frustrating either for a reader or a listener.
Yeah. And so is outlining, the best strategy? Is that a good way to start? So like that you don't get into trouble aimlessly talking or writing about other things that are not on topic?
So I think there's always sort of multiple strategies that people do better with. I tend to sort of, when I get invited to give a talk, I think about what's the main idea that I want to convey. And then oftentimes what I do is I use PowerPoint as my way to, in a way, outline or organize, because I'll take slides from different stuff I've done, or I'll make a place slide like I want to talk about the microbiome and cancer here, and just sort of start throwing things in. And that becomes sort of like, if I had 3 hours, this is all the content I would want to give. And then I start cutting, moving stuff around so it flows. And, I am a big advocate and spending time getting prepared early and practicing several times. And even as I'm practicing on the plane to the conference or whatnot, I'm still doing a little bit of editing, because most of the time there's a lot more content than what you should have in there. And I think people get afraid they're going to finish early, so they leave a bunch of stuff in. And I tend to slice. If it doesn't flow, I take it out. And I've never had a talk where I said, "Oh, I wish I had more material." Usually it's the opposite, because there's nothing worse than feeling rushed.
Yeah.
And look, nobody's going to be mad at you if you give them 10 minutes back, or you
Yes.
just have more time for questions and discussions, which is much more fun anyway.
Agreed. Agreed. But I like that point though, that if it's not flowing, just cut it out. Because most of us see that as, oh, this is a problem. I better find some linking words, bridging sentences or phrases or whatever, try to make it work. And sometimes you just have to say, you know what, forget about it. Don't even go there. And like that, problem solved. Then you can continue moving forward. That's such a tough decision to make.
Yeah, I agree. And, at the end of the day, whether it's an outline form or in script form or just using PowerPoint as a way to organize your thoughts, you do want to have some organization. There's very few people that can just get up on a stage and start talking without, having at least given some thought to the order and the key points.
Yeah. Um, okay, so I think that's fairly clear. Now, let's go back a little bit and let's talk a little bit about the challenge that is to present during an interview. So you're invited you're a candidate for an interview, a position, so on and so forth, and you're invited to give a presentation for the company. In that presentation, you want to show your ability, your expertise, maybe some of the techniques that you know how to do in the lab that might be useful in that position that you're going after. What's the right balance there, Karen? Because I tend to think that sometimes people do go overboard in those types of presentations, and it's a bad idea.
Yeah. So the first thing I recommend, for the trainees that I help when they're interviewing, is learn about the people, learn about the department, learn about the university, because you want your talk to, or the company, you want your talk to fit into their mission, their visions, their goals. They have to be able to visualize you as being a part of the team. And so the structure, to me, is probably a little bit different, because you may not have one clear through line of one scientific topic, because you want to highlight a few different aspects of what you've done in your career. So really the through line is you, right?
Mm.
Because you're trying to show them that you would be a great asset to the company. So there needs to be a little bit more of, I hate to say selling, but you are sort of making the case for why you're the right person. So I, it's funny because I just did this with somebody that works with me, and I gave her the talk that I gave when I interviewed here 9 years ago, and my strategy was pretty simple. I had 3 stories, so I kind of stick with no more than 3 big points in a talk, because nobody can remember 25 different lessons in a talk. And so I had 3 brief stories that highlighted different things about what I've done. that tied into the research interest here at the Translational Research Institute. And then at the end, I explained to them why I think that I would be a great employee here. And I gave a few vignettes of, here's what I can do if I was here. And then I also like to help them think about, okay, I can help you with what you're doing today, but what do we do tomorrow? How do we push innovation? So then I also gave a few examples of just ideas I had of where this institute could go next. And I got the job, so I guess I did okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. But that is, again, I think, if I heard you well, and if I'm receptive to your lesson here, is do your homework, find
Yes.
out what it is that the company does, what's its mission, and make sure that you're aligned with that mission. What are the best resources for that? Should we, like, obviously online, but are there any other resources, any other way of doing that homework?
So, unless you happen to know someone that works there or has worked there, that you just ask them some questions. And I've been pretty lucky that I've had those opportunities sometimes, not when coming down here, but with my first postdoctoral position. I knew somebody who was very well versed at what that institute was going to do. And she's a trusted mentor of mine that I've had for 25 plus years, and she felt it would be a good fit for me. So that, that's a good thing. Talk to your mentor if it's a, program like Purdue or these major companies or universities. There's probably someone that your mentor knows or that they personally know about the institute. So you can ask questions within your network if you're not able to get what you need looking
Mhm.
at it online, or in addition to that even.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not how you're going to get the information, but who's going to help you get that information.
Yes.
So important, which is, again, maybe another lesson, right? It's something I've been trying to teach my kids recently is when you encounter a problem, everybody goes, oh, how am I going to solve this problem? But in many cases, you should be asking yourself, who is going to help me solve this problem? Because we do so much together. Tell us a little bit about these mentors. It sounded like this one for a long time has impacted your life in a very positive way.
Yeah, so, I've been thinking a lot lately about, how important advocacy is. So for your mentors to advocate fiercely for you, and then you in return advocate for the people that work with you,
Mm.
you know, advocate for a seat at a table that they may never have had the chance to go to, but you put them forth. So the mentor I was thinking of at that specific moment in time, her name's Kathy Levinson. She's at Florida State University, and she was actually my first example of a geek that speaks. And I was just a little undergrad. I was very fresh and young, and I watched her on stage, and I was just like, my jaw was on the ground because, first she dresses impeccably. She's very fashion forward, and she carried this confidence, and she was talking about complicated things like metallothionein 3 and neurons and copper and signaling, and I still understood some. I didn't understand like every single thing. I was brand new to Florida State. But so when she got off the stage, I said, Dr. Levinson, how'd you do that? And she said, practice. I said, no, come on, really, like, how did you do that? She said, practice. And literally, I didn't believe her for many years. I thought, maybe she's born with it, but no amount of Maybelline makeup is going to help me do what she does, So I really thought it was something that you were born with. And people say that to me today. And clearly there's some level of talent and comfort on the stage, but certainly practice is a huge component. I mean, even when I was a dancer, I was more passionate and invested, and so I practiced. Yeah, I wasn't one of those people that, at age 3 was doing, 20 pirouettes. I didn't have that level of talent, but I made up for it with passion and practice. So she was 100% right. And, I'm a different speaker type than her. But I still carry a lot of the things that I saw in her when I give talks. So the people like that are just so important. And that reminds me too that, those little encounters, those little words of advice or encouragement are sometimes some of the things that just shift your trajectory more than any sort of big groundbreaking thing. And I mentioned this because those kindnesses, those words of advice that we all don't think matter, they really do. So if you ever feel compelled to encourage someone or give them some advice, do it, because you never know. That could be just what they needed to hear at that moment.
I'm gonna take that advice to heart, and I'm gonna do something today.
Oh,
I'm gonna
great.
make a change today to say something and give at least good compliments, right? It's paying it forward in that way. You said something that uh struck me as, boy, maybe I don't know as much as I thought about speakers. What do you mean you're a different speaker type?
Oh, that's a great question. So
Yeah.
there's three parts to my curriculum, and the second is called Beyond Words, because the words are one thing, but how you deliver those words is very unique.
Mm.
So as I mentioned, I'm a Latina, so I'm a little more animated. I can be a little bit goofy, a little funny. Sometimes people find that a little strange, because in scientific conferences, you're supposed to be all serious, but I'm like, why? I mean, we're sitting here for hours, so sometimes I'll say something off the cuff, and she was a little bit more um elegant and uh, a quiet power.
Mm.
I'm just loud. So I think everybody has their own personality, and that comes across on the stage, and you don't want to become someone else. So I show examples in my classes about different types of sort of famous speakers, and they were all very effective in their own way. So I want people to embrace who they are. Like when you're comfortable talking, with your friends and family, what are you like? Some of that should come across on the stage, even though it seems counterintuitive because it should
Mm.
be like a formal speech. But I just disagree with that. I think people have a much better experience if you let your personality kind of come out a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. And it's a criticism, not a criticism, but it's a point of guidance that I've gotten on the program before, that, oh, maybe I should open up a little bit more. I, as a communications specialist, and I don't know if you've seen some of the other Pathfinder videos, but are there things that I should be cognizant about that I'm doing that I should stop doing, or things that you've noticed? Oh, Tommy could use some improvement in that area, and I'm opening myself up for criticism here.
Well, I haven't watched a whole bunch of them, but I'll watch a couple and I'll email you some tips. But right now, just in this interview, I feel like you're personable and it's comfortable and it's not, I've done other interviews where they were too scripted. We're going to
Yeah,
go question one, question two, question three, and those just don't turn out as engaging as
yeah.
just allowing the conversation to flow a little bit. I mean, certainly there's certain points that an interviewer or a podcast host wants to make sure is part of the content, and that's okay, but letting it flow a little, I think, is good. So no, I think you're nailing it today.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Karen. That's really good. And if you do have some other feedback, I'm all open to learning and to improving as much as I can. I have a passion for communicating complex science to the broad audience. And I know you expressed this before too, and I know that what I found was that as I was progressing through my career in science, I realized that this was my, ace in my pocket type of thing, that I could relate to a lot of people, both in Spanish and English. Was it like that for you too? Was it in a way that you realized, oh, not too many people have this type of ability so early on?
So my journey, was long, and I remember even in middle school we had some sort of 4-H club thingy where you gave a speech, and I think I won an award, and I first of all I didn't want to do it because I mentioned that I'm happy backstage, and I never believed the compliments for many many years. I would just think that they're just being nice because I've observed that many times. A talk that's not so great gets all these compliments at the end, and it's like, boy, you're doing that person a disservice. So it just took me a while to sort of own it and believe in myself. But then once I sort of like the veil lifted, I realized that it is uh something that I just gravitate towards. I'm a, there's a lot of things people can be. They can teach, they can be a numbers person. There's all kinds, and I'm a natural teacher. I taught dance when I was young, did choreography. I, I've always liked to tutor people. So it's just something that is one of my things that I enjoy, and I think an aptitude of mine.
Yeah.
And I've heard that a lot, that people can see the passion come through when I'm speaking, for one, and that I can help them understand complicated things. So I always do my best to make sure that I structure slides and content in a way that is understandable, and all of us can do it. It just takes more work.
Mhm. And when, I've seen also the mistake of people overdoing it, over passionate about, every graph or every, and you're like, okay, well, yeah,
I
yeah.
haven't seen that yet, but the day I do, I'll think of this conversation.
Yeah, I think there is such a continuum, right, of approaches, and as you said, this is so fascinating, the different types of speakers that we have, and maybe it's a little bit cultural, as you said, you're a little
Mhm.
bit more boisterous because of your Latina background, or other speakers are more, more serious. They won't crack a joke, and but what's the key though? Because you want to be able to establish credibility and trust, right? You want to be able to be appealing. So even as you crack a joke or you make somebody smile, I mean, there's emotion in there, and people are attracted to other people who have emotions as well, and not just robotic, right?
Yeah, when you make the audience feel something, excitement or even, a little humor or stress relief, that goes a long way. And I think, you know, going back to your comment of people that are over passionate, there's also people that are maybe overconfident and um not as transparent as they should be. So I try to make sure that for myself and for others that I'm helping, there's not one right answer all the time, right? So knowing the literature around it and establishing credibility by making those comparisons, we saw this in this situation, but in this other situation, these other discoveries were made, because there's usually validity in both. It's just a different design or a different approach.
Mm.
So I think that you can be personable, but the way you present your data and the way you explain it and the way you demonstrate your knowledge of the field will give you that credibility. And then, the humor doesn't discredit you because they already can see that you know what you're talking about and that you've explained it in an interesting way. So, it just takes a little bit of time, but both can happen at the same time. And I think, younger people, postdocs and such, the postdoc that I work with, she's already really great at communication, but she said, boy, I was trained to be so much more formal, and I want to relax a little bit. And it just feels a little strange when you're a little earlier on and maybe haven't done it a whole bunch
Mm.
versus, having 20 plus years of experience sort of testing out how you want to deliver content. So basically back to practice and putting in the work, and you want to be comfortable. Look, if you don't want to crack jokes, please don't force yourself to crack a joke. Um, we have one dietitian here she's kind of looks serious all the time, and she'll be up there, very poised, giving a talk in her own way. And out of nowhere, with a straight face, she'll crack a joke. And it is so effective because you didn't see it coming. So I always use her as an example, like, there's just different ways to be engaging. Think of Oprah versus Steve Jobs. Oprah's inspiring and she takes up a lot of space and she creates a lot of emotion. And Steve Jobs was a lot more subdued, but
Yes.
still he brought you in and got you excited
Yes.
about that new technology. So there's just different ways to do it. And at the end, if you're true to yourself, that's the most effective way to do it.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe also there's something to be said about the practice, right? And how many times you practice. You as a performer dance, I also play music. I know that technique is one thing, but as I practice and practice and practice, technique becomes secondhand after doing it for so long. And then you can have your own expression. Then you can paint it with your own colors. Then you can bring in, as you said, your emotions into it. But only after you have it down packed, you practice it enough that, oh, I know exactly what to do. I know this movement, or I know what we need to be saying here. Now I can deliver it in my way with my perspective or my color.
Exactly. And I think, the very first steps for an early career person who just says, I want to be better at this, it starts with having that theme, keeping your data to just what you need to make the point, knowing when you need to show the Western blot and when you can summarize with a few bullet points. And if you get that down pat, already it's 10 notches better. And then over time, if you become someone that eventually really wants to speak more, enjoys it, then all those other things will follow. But, not everybody wants to be on stage all the time or on camera all the time like I do. And that's okay. It's just that as scientists, we need to go from wherever we are to a couple notches better, not just because it's good for your own individual career. A good speaker is going to get noticed. People are going to remember what you said. It's because it helps to advance science. If you're putting people to sleep, nobody's hearing your brilliance. It's getting lost in a sea of, chaos and confusion. So no matter what, it's important for all of us to improve. But maybe, not everybody wants to be a rock star. They just want to be, a good speaker, which is still very much appreciated by your audience. You don't have to, everybody doesn't have to get to rock star level, I guess is my point.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing, as you were saying that, I was picturing the rock star, obviously the important level of attraction of that rock star or superstar Nobel Prize winning scientist, right? To also the people that are honing in their skills and very nervous still, and the feeling of inadequacy when you first start. But do you find, and maybe it is the performer in you, do you find that the more you do it, the more you like doing it? Is that something, again, that we should save so that people can gain the confidence that, hey, the more you do this, the better it becomes and more fun you will have?
For sure. As I mentioned earlier, I went from please don't ever put me on a stage to over time,
Yeah.
finding that, oh, I actually enjoy this. So, some people aren't going to be like, oh, please let me do a talk, but everybody should be able to get comfortable.
Yeah.
And, I think the main thing is to spend the time to organize your thoughts, to try to make it relevant to the people in the room, to stay on time, and not to look like you literally threw 100 slides together and just didn't even practice, didn't even think about it, because that is like the fastest way to turn off an audience. So just getting to the point where you're clear, organized, intentional, and stay on time, that already is miles above what sometimes we get at scientific conferences.
Yeah, that's so true. And I guess, one question that I have is, you really seem to have gone deep into the specialty of scientific communication and so on, but with a wonderful background in nutrition and metabolism and microbiome, which we haven't even talked about. I am,
I'll have
I'm,
to come
s-
back, Tommy.
I hope you can come back. Um, have you seen that evolve because the microbiome field is so nascent? I know nutrition field, it has a lot more history, but microbiome, the tie-in with nutrition, the tie-in of microbiome and immunology, the whole world that is opening up due to next gen sequencing and bioinformatics, and like there's so much happening in artificial intelligence and machine learning applications for this field. I mean, like, we need to be better at communicating what is happening, and not only to other scientists, but to the people that are out there that could benefit from these new breakthroughs. If you can, for just a couple minutes, tell us a little bit about that balance of communicating to scientists, but also to the broader audience, and in this field that is so exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really one of my biggest drivers because um, there's when I started as a dietitian in 1998, I held most of the information because everybody didn't have a phone in their hand, right? So the flow was from professional to patient. Now everybody has their Dr. Google on their phone, and it is, to me, not just a nice thing to do, but our duty to get the right information out there and elevate the voices of trained scientists who know their fields so that we can rise above the noise of uninformed opinion leaders. So I think it is just absolutely critical. And to me, the difference between speaking to the key opinion leader versus family, friends, community, it really goes back to picking out the pieces of your science that have meaning to them and breaking it down in a way they can understand. So for instance, here's an example, epigenetics. When I was doing some work at UNC Chapel Hill on choline and one carbon metabolism, I was trying to explain to people why diets don't work. And what I mean by that is that one diet doesn't work for everyone. And I was trying to explain some of the science behind that, genetics, epigenetics. And so I came up with this concept of a charm bracelet, where the bracelet itself is the DNA, unchangeable. It is what it is. The charms are the epigenetic marks. So they totally change the characteristic of that bracelet, but the bracelet itself hasn't changed. And so that's how I explained how epigenetics then transforms DNA into a different outcome. So it
Mhm.
just takes a little creativity and thinking to figure out how to create examples of things that are complicated but can be absorbed really by all audiences. Clearly, I'm not going to tell them about reagents and about, just just that's just not going to help them. But what's the information they need that they can apply to their life? And that's what I love about nutrition, is that we all eat. So nutrition is applicable to everyone. And when we made these new discoveries in the microbiome field that I felt compelled that could be taken directly from the lab to people's kitchen tables, I got very happy because that's like my whole life's goal, is to do science that people can use. So I think all of us can do it. And you just might need to hang around with some friends and ask them to help you. I'm trying to explain this. How could I connect with you? So you mentioned earlier, have a little help from your friends. You don't have to do this alone. Hopefully you have a good mentor. You have some colleagues that are at your career level. You have some family that's willing to listen to you practice a few times and go, what? What'd you just say?
Right.
And then over time you can learn to sort of break it down that way.
Karen, thank you so much for that. And thank you for what you do. Really, it's such an important work, and thank you for your relentless effort and ambition to make us all better communicators, better storytellers. To Dr. Karen Corbin, is the clinical translational scientist at AdventHealth Translational Research, and is also the chief geek at Geeks That Speak. Thank you so much for being our Pathfinder today. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us once again, and remember to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel.